Welcome back to Where You Live with Gene and Tony. We are broadcasting from the Concierge Landscape Studios. We're brought to you this hour by Extreme Exteriors and American Family Insurance, the Kim Bennett Agency. It's great to have you with us. I'd like to just let our listeners know in the first hour, we've got a great resource for you. It's a bi-monthly newsletter that we put out, and it's free. All you have to do is give us a call during the week at 952-922-2500. Ask for Courtney, and she'll make sure that you start receiving your free subscription.
I want to mention that if you have questions or concerns or ideas for a topic for discussion, please call our hotline and let us know. The hotline number is 952-224-2668. And in fact, we have two and possibly three if there's time.
Yes.
Questions that did come in from listeners. And it's so fun to be able to address those.
That's right. Yeah. And so that the hotline number again, Tony?
952-224-2668.
Yep.
Or email, right?
That's right. Email is Gene, Gene, at ncmgi.com. Well, let's take one of those recent emails that we've got.
All right.
This is from a president of a homeowners association here in Minnesota, asking the question, really, what is a reasonable accommodation for a homeowner? And they're dealing with this issue. Here's the situation. They said, follow-up question I'm pursuing. There's a resident in our association who made a request to the board that was denied.
Okay.
That request was to install an invisible fence in order for her to be able to let her dog out and to come in, so it would be restrained within the area of the backyard right around her home. Of course, the association denied that request. Now she's asking for a special audience to be face-to-face with the board to explain her situation because she feels that she has extenuating circumstances. What are those? She says rheumatoid arthritis.
She thinks she has a reasonable request for an accommodation based on her disability.
Yes, and apparently it seems that for her, then she's saying, it's difficult for me to, I suppose, manage and to take care of my dog by putting it on a leash, walking it, to picking up after it. So I want to be able to do that. And the president of this association is asking the question: would this be considered a reasonable accommodation
under the fair housing laws?
Yeah, they said,
right?
From our understanding, the fair housing laws says that a person with a handicap can make requests for reasonable accommodations that would enable a disabled person to enjoy the same rights as a non-disabled person, that must be considered with two exceptions. They said, number one, their understanding is the accommodation does not put an undue financial or administrative burden on the property or association. And number two, does not substantially alter the purpose of the property or its program. Is this law applicable in this case? Tony?
And my response is absolutely. Fair housing law is applicable at a homeowners association, as is the Americans with Disabilities Act. The way she quotes the fair housing law is a little bit off kilter. She seems to say that they don't even have to consider it, this request.
Oh, you get that idea?
Well, she says as a request must be considered with two exceptions. The accommodation does not put undue financial or administrative burden on the property and does not substantially alter the purpose of the property. You still have to consider it. You may deny it based on those two exceptions. Yep. You may deny it if it puts an undue financial or administrative burden on the property, or it substantially alters the purpose of the property. So I really think it's important to make the point to homeowners associations that they are responsible for compliance with federal fair housing laws and state fair housing laws.
Yeah.
I think it's a topic that is neglected in both property management training in homeowners associations and board training in homeowners associations.
Now, I would probably say in her case here, when she's saying, do we have to think of this request, or can't we just outrightly just say no? The answer is yes, you can say that before it becomes a issue for fair housing. I mean, if the homeowner just says, I want install a invisible fence.
That's right.
Yes, the answer is yes. The board can say no. Categorically,
you can't do that
because
if
for
it's against
reasons.
Right. That's right. Because the board has architectural control, and usually in most associations, you can't let a dog run loose under any circumstances.
What's interesting, and this is the part I suppose it's causing me to be maybe a little bit.
This is what got you feisty.
Yeah, a little bit feisty. This and another story we're going to deal with a little bit later on too, and that is what is considered, a reasonable accommodation. How far do we go? And I don't mean to be tongue in cheek or to be unsensitive, to someone who's disabled. But really, it seems like in society we get to a point where we're going further and further and pushing those bounds and that envelope all the time, and it. After a while, a few years later, you look at it and you go, "How did we get here?"
Yeah.
It seems ridiculous. Here's the case here. In the case of, I'll give you another example. We had an association. Person said, "It's a condo, underground parking." They said, "You must give me this parking spot, board, that's right by the elevator, closest to the elevator."
Okay.
Board said, "I can't do that. It's not ours to give. Each garage stall is apportioned out and is
privately owned. Yeah.
Privately owned, and is in the legal description of the unit. And so the unit owner owns it. We don't have it to give. It's not a reasonable accommodation."
Yeah.
In this particular case, I think it's okay to consider it, but I think that does. What my fear is that what that means in our society is people say, well, now that I've asked for it, and I can prove that, and I can prove that
we haven't talked about that part yet.
Yeah, and now that I can prove that, show that it's considered disability, you got to give it to me the way I want it, how I want it. Yeah. And again, I guess I just think if we're going to talk about a reasonable accommodation, we're going to consider it. Can't we also consider and bring up other ideas and other possibilities? How about in the case of the boy who had cerebral palsy and needed the playhouse?
Yeah.
I don't know that the playhouse was the only thing that was going to give him the physical therapy
was that
he
the only
needed.
Solution? Yeah.
So here we are with this particular case.
Yeah.
My fear is that we're getting
an invisible fence the only solution to her issue? And you're talking about the big picture, Gene, and you're talking about the philosophical approach to this question. And I know you're right. We've discussed this before. We get requests for, or we have heard of requests for service animals that include things like my monitor lizard, not a monitor, but whatever. My big lizard is my service animal, or my boa constrictor is my service animal. And property managers and boards go, wait a minute, is this what's really meant by a service animal? So there's a lot of gray areas in the fair housing law that have caused problems for residential properties.
Yes, and in this particular case, I'm just thinking of the actual specifics here. An invisible fence. So the person's saying, I can't walk the dog, on a leash. Because I have a hard time. But now, so you put an invisible fence so the dog can easily go out, drop, go, and come back in. That's fine for her. But now you have an issue of all of those piles and all of those things.
What about cleanup? If she's unable to walk the dog, is she able to pick up after the dog?
Because I don't think that a reasonable accommodation would mean that the other owners have to put up with that.
No.
And then if you're talking about a cost of money ongoing to have someone go pick it up, then couldn't the board also talk about, well, let's talk about another idea. How about, is there someone that could walk the dog?
Why don't you pay someone to walk the dog?
Walk the dog instead of that. So there's other things that, to me, seems more reasonable.
Yeah.
But that's the thing that bothers me with this debate.
Is that, the reasonableness.
Yeah.
The law does not prevent you from having these discussions with people. You probably should not specifically discuss someone's disability or ask them questions specifically about what their disability is.
Right.
That is probably not legal, but certainly you could come up with ideas that might be reasonable. And I think absolutely you can discuss that with the person making the request. But I want to emphasize to associations, you can't just blow this off.
I agree. We're in agreement there. If someone is saying that something is an issue of fair housing, you must consider it and
deal with it
and must deal with it. But I guess our hope is that for the person who's asking for the request, that you would also try to allow cool heads to prevail, and for people to be able to try and consider other options that are workable. That, to me, is just being a good neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hey, we're going to take a break. Don't go away. We've got a lot more of Where You Live right after this.